श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। दिक्कालाद्यनवच्छिन्न चिन्मात्रमूर्तये स्वानुभूत्यमेकमानाय नमः शांताय तेजसे. So that was an invocation to Shiva, that I bow to Shiva, who is consciousness and is yet a murti or a form of consciousness. So dik kal adi anavachinna. Shiva is not covered or is not touched by space, dik space, kal time, and any other attribute which is material, adi. Dik, kal, adi, anavachinna. He is untouched. And who is he? Chinnamatra murtaye. He or it or that is only consciousness. And yet, Bhartrihari, the poet, the author of this verse from Vairagya Shatak, he uses the word Chinnamatra Murtaye. Now, Murti is a form. So he says that he is a form of pure consciousness. Chinnamatra Murtaye. Dikkaladhyanavachinna Chinnamatra Murtaye. And how is he known? Swanabhuti Ekamanaya. The only way one can perceive him, one can see, one can know is by self-experience. Swanabhuti Mekamanaya Namaha Shantaya Tejase. I bow to such a Shiva. Now I have chosen this verse for tonight to cap this discourse, so to speak, because it has this problematic in it, Chinnamatra Murtaye. That is, it is consciousness which is beyond time, space, which is beyond properties, and yet it is a Murti. Now this oxymoron or the seeming contradiction is also going to come up today in our Dharma Pravesha, because this is an essential feature of Hinduism, where the Nirguna and the Saguna are two sides of the same coin. The kind of division that we see in other philosophical approaches regarding the formless supreme, the supreme as formless only, and in contradiction of that there is considered to be something very gross as idol worship. In Hinduism that does not exist. So this verse talks about the most essential, indicates the most essential quality of all Hindu thought, as a matter of fact of all Indian thought. Now, after the invocation, I come to the topic, Dharma Pravesh. In simple English, initiating somebody into Hinduism, formally making a Hindu. I would not like to call it Hindu baptism, because that would be taking a kind of a simile from somewhere else, which doesn't suit our purpose. But what I mean is very clear. How does a person who wants to be included in the Hindu fold undergoes a particular ritual by which it is certified that he is now a Hindu. You see, rituals are what may be called rites of passage, that you go from one state of being to another state of being, or one stage of life to another stage of life, from one avastha to another avastha. And in the Hindu system of life, that is how a life is to be marked and led, there are 16 sanskaras or 16 specific rituals which mark certain stages of life. That is from the beginning, Garbhadhan, or rather before Pumsavan or Garbhadhan, and then 15 others till the last, which is the Antyeshti. So there is a series of ritual which marks your stages of life, and that is very important, because Dharma Pravesh means that one is going to join the Hindu fold by joining this sequence of 16 rituals at an appropriate place. So we will see now where the new entrant into Hinduism would join, but it would be as part of the sequence. Now the question that comes first of all is this: why do we need a ritual like that? Now I don't want to go today into all those discussions. Can you become a Hindu if you are not born in a Hindu? Because for a very long time we have been told, even in India, that you can never become a Hindu, you are only born into Hinduism. Now all this is nothing to do with history, it has nothing to do with practices, and it has nothing to do what India has been practicing for thousands of years. Here people have been initiating themselves into a major darshan and adopting a sadhana for that darshan. There have been so many darshanas, the Vedic, the Bauddha, the Jaina, the Astik, the Nastik, the Shaiva, etc., you know all. And they have all adopted different kinds of methods of pursuing the ultimate goal, or sadhanas. Now all that is initiation, all that is from the Indian Hindu point of view, all that is, one may like to call it conversion, or one may like to call it initiation, or one may like to call it as Dharma Pravesh or Dharma Chakra Pravartan, as was the name given by Buddha. Buddha initiated people into his path, and that was called Dharma Chakra Pravartan, and he was doing the Dharma Chakra Pravartan. So Dharma Pravesh is bringing those people who are not part of the Indian dharmic traditions, but who want to join the Indian dharmic philosophical systems, or broadly speaking, those who wish to join the Hindu umbrella, so to speak. Now, the most important thing here is dharma, because dharma is quite obviously different from certain rituals practiced in other parts of the world, certain articles of faith upheld by other so-called religions. And dharma is considered to be something which is a unique system of living, of pursuing and of fulfilling yourself in India. In India, there is no system of thought which cannot be called anything else but dharmic. Any system in India rests itself on dharma, no matter what way it can be defined. You may define dharma with one emphasis or another kind of an emphasis, but it will be always related to dharma. That is why I have chosen this word dharma pravesh, that you can join dharma and you can then join any other stream of Hinduism which you find suitable to your taste, to your best method of pursuing your spiritual awakening, your spiritual benefit. But that is the essential door, the door of dharma. Now it has become very important in India, and I would not hesitate to say so. It has become very important in India today for political reasons also, because India is under a severe onslaught of Christian proselytization, of Islamic proselytization, and Marxist proselytization. All these three proselytizations which promote consumerism, capitalist consumerism, and the grossest ideas of life, they are a threat to dharma. And therefore, India has to stand up and reclaim its own people. It has to reclaim them in a way that it may never have felt the need of reclaiming them earlier. Because now it is a matter of sheer saving one's existence. If we do not save our people, we would be very, very quickly losing control, losing the physical number in terms of demography. So Dharma Pravesh is not only to bring those who are non-Hindus into Hinduism, but also those Hindus who have totally forgotten about the Hindu darshanas and the Hindu sadhanas. I'm not very fond of using the word Hindu way of life, because this phrase, way of life, is now very controversial, because everybody has a way of life. I like to make it more specific, that it is Hindu darshana. It is a set of not belief or something unseen, but darshana, something which you have a glimpse of, and hence you have faith in it, not because you have no idea of what it is. So the Hindu darshana includes then as its corollary the idea of Hindu sadhana, because just by darshana your life is not fulfilled. In order to achieve and understand a perception or an initial drishti or what you have seen, you have to do a sadhana, and therefore there is a way of proceeding in your spiritual development and in your spiritual unfolding, and that is a specific sadhana. And all kinds of sadhanas have been practiced in India, allowed in India, and they are experimented constantly. So Dharma Pravesh therefore means that one has to understand what one is entering. Now, regarding Dharma Pravesh, the first step here, as I mentioned, is dharma pravesh. And then the second step is something which I would say is udabhas. Now this would be the first step in the ritual. You see, in the Abrahamic religion, what you very often do is you are made to denounce what you have been believing earlier. There is the doctrine that it is for the first time that you see the truth, that you had been so far living in a world of untruth, that you have been worshipping the false gods, and now you have come through Jesus to Patros, the Father. In fact, you have come to the Trinity, that is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So, other than Trinity, whatever is there has to be denounced. It has to be put away. Now, this putting away or denouncing is an essential part of the Christian faith. And this putting away or denouncing what is not acceptable to me as my religious conviction is also part of the Judaic faith. So this distinction between true God and false God is very essential for the Jews, for the Christians, and the Muslims. So the Muslims would say that there is the world of ignorance or jahaliya, and a person who accepts Islam comes out of jahalat or comes out of ignorance to accept the true faith in which he accepts Allah and the prophethood of Muhammad. Now, for the Hindu, that does not seem either logical, nor truthful. Because if you are there as a person, if you are there as a jiva, if you have taken birth or you have taken earlier birth, then you are bringing with yourself a whole karmic force. You are bringing your karmas, you are bringing your prarabdha, and just by calling that your whole past as jahalat or as something false, you cannot simply wash it away. It is there and it has to be transformed by something else, about which we will talk, that is by accepting the Karma Siddhanta. But the idea that whatever you have been is some kind of a falsehood, something which is far away from the truth, is not how the reality is seen in any of the Indian systems. So, what we see here is the bursting of a light or the dawning of a light or an udbhasa. That is the bhasa or light, it bursts forth. So this is the first step. So when the beginning or the initiation of this 5-step ceremony starts, where the neophyte is introduced into Hinduism, this udbhas or seeing the light. Now, the light is not something which fights darkness. Darkness disappears on its own when there is light. It's not a contradiction. Light is seen, light is perceived, and light is there as the very force of life, and therefore seeing the light is something which includes whatever you have earlier with you. So it is in this sense that you understand that you are beginning on a new journey. And therefore, seeing the light means that the first step would be that the initiate is given the Gayatri Mantra. Now the Gayatri Mantra I have chosen is not just because Gayatri Mantra is the most popular mantra, but because it is the most essential mantras out of the Vedic mantras. Savitri, Savita, or the sun, is the source of all energy. It is the source of all worldly creation, and therefore there can be nothing either material or beyond material without the sun. And therefore the sun or Savita signifies not only the physical light but also the light of knowledge, and therefore that is the first mantra which is to be given. So now Gayatri or mantra is acceptable in all different denominations of Hinduism. Now certainly certain mantras are not used, for instance, in the Buddha or the Jaina or other sects. But here what we are doing is not initiating a person into a specific individual sampradaya. You see, it's very important to understand that let us say 2000 years ago in India, if somebody were to be initiated into a community or into a sampradaya, then that would be into a particular denomination. As it can happen now, as it does happen now. For instance, people have been initiated into the Hare Krishna movement, which is a part of the Vaishnava movement, and so forth. And that does not mean that they are any less Hindus. But here we are talking of another phenomena, as I explained right in the beginning. The broad term that you are initiated into the Hindu fold is what we are talking about. After getting initiated into the Hindu fold, the person can move on to any sampradaya. And to my mind, if the person, for instance, if they become Jain a little later, if they become Shaivite, then that does not contradict the Hindu tradition in all. Because the Hindu tradition is not to be limited to what has been called by the Western anthropologists and Indologists as the Vedic Samhita tradition. You see, the Vedic tradition in North American Indology means something else. It means whatever is to be seen in the mantras of the four Samhitas. And the people who study these four Samhitas are called Vedicists, like our Michael Witzel or George Thompson, etc. You see, so these people, they look upon only the Samhita as text, and they think that was the word of the ancient Vedas, and that was it. Now in India, Veda is not experienced that way, as you all know. It's not time for me to expound like that in detail on that, because here in India we don't talk about the Veda Samhita only. For us, the Veda Samhita is part of Veda and Veda Mata. You see, whenever you see in a text, nobody uses the word Ved Samhita. For instance, even the four Vedas are not called Ved Samhitas. They are called Ved. And the Ved Mat means not just the Samhita, but it means the Samhita, the Aranyaka, the Upanishads, and then a large number of Shastras and Shikshas. It means a whole textual tradition, out of which the tradition of Shaivas, Smartas, Shaktas, etc. all grow. Now, when it comes down to certain individual sadhanas at a later stage, that some of the rituals or some of the karmas of the earlier Vedic system were not used. So obviously the Bauddhas never used anything to do with yajna or Agni. So if you want to get entangled into that kind of an argument today, that in order to initiate yourself into Hinduism, to which sampradaya will you go to, then I think you are very quietly walking into the trap which has been very well laid out by the Western Indologists. Because they don't want to recognize that beyond sampradaya, there is something called the broad umbrella of Hinduism. They don't want to accept that, and they are very anxious to denigrate it as either militant Hinduism or Hindu nationalism or a political version of it by which they try to malign it. I think it is time that we understand that beyond the specific sampradayas and the sadhanas of the specific sampradayas, there is acceptance of a whole textual tradition. And that textual tradition begins with the Vedas and comes right down to our modern rishis like Sri Aurobindo. So in order to use the mantras, the texts, or the shlokas, or certain performing traditions of any of this whole tradition is as much part of Hinduism as any other part. You see, all of them are valid because they belong to this whole one single tradition. That is why I take Gayatri. Certainly Gayatri is not used by every sampradayas. It is not used by Shaktas. It is not used by Jainas. But for reasons that I gave you, you have to choose certain things. As a matter of fact, no matter which mantra you will use, will not be acceptable for certain other sampradayas. But as I clarified, we are not initiating here a person into a sampradaya. We are initiating the person into dharma. This is dharma pravesh. This is not pravesh into the sampradaya of Jinas or Jain. This is not pravesh into Buddhism. This is not pravesh into Shaktism. So if you look upon that, then I think what I am doing would appear reasonable to you, and that would seem to be the only way. Otherwise, you simply walk into the trap, as I said, that instead of initiating somebody into dharma or initiating into Hinduism, you would be initiating people into small sampradayas, which is not the purpose. Now, the second mantra, which should be part of the first ceremony called Udbhasa. Yeah, for a minute we go back to Udbhasa, Rajiv ji. Yeah, the second would be that a explanation is given Brahmavad are explained to the person. Brahmavad needs to be explained because this is extremely important. Sarvam idam khalu Brahma is very important, as this is the core of Hindu thought. Now you may come back and say, well, this is only Brahmavad. This is something which could be accepted only by the Upanishads. This is something which may not be accepted in the same way, just as Gayatri was not accepted by a Jain or a Bauddha or a Shakta or a Vaishnava. So the same argument, the same objection or apatti can be made for that. But my answer would be the same. That Sarvam idam khalu Brahma is a doctrine which is followed by all sampradayas. They express it differently in their own language. For instance, for a Bauddha, the creator and the creation are not two. For a Jain, the creation and the creator are not two. For a Shakta, the creator, which is the Devi, for a Shakta, and the creation are not separate. Devi is the totality. She is worshipped by Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. And this whole universe, this sansara, is Devi itself. So the doctrine of Sarvam idam khalu Brahma, although is Brahmavad, but at the same time it expresses the essential unity of the creator and created, which is to be found in all Indian thought, all Indian philosophical dispensations. Now, this is also very important because today our whole confrontation with the Abrahamic religions rests on this very, very important principle. In the Christian and the Islamic world, creator and creation are two. Creation is something inferior. Creation is something which is made by the creator, and the creator is above creation. Whereas in all Indian systems, creation appears to be different from the creator. Jagat appears to be different from Brahma, but is a manifestation of Brahma, is a Brahma. The Saguna Brahma and the Nirguna Brahma are both Brahma, and the Saguna Sakara is only in certain attributes but not in essential quality different from the Nirguna Nirakar. So these relationships are very, very clearly laid out in our system, and they contrast, greatly contrast the Abrahamic system. The primary reason why Murti Puja is not accepted in the Abrahamic system is because a Murti consists of the material of the creation, and therefore it is inferior. It is not fully God or divine, and because if it is not divine, it is therefore not to be worshipped, and to worship that is to worship a false god, or in Islamic terms it is shirk. At the same time, here I do not think that it is right to be caught in the controversy between Advaita and Dvaita. You see, the Dvaita and Advaita contradiction concerns only the final realization. The final realization whether there is a laya where the jiva is no distinct and never distinct from the Brahma, where the jiva always remains to be different. Now, under this contradiction, the idea has been resolved by positing the doctrine of Maya, that the duality is there only so long as there is Maya. Now, even in Dvaita, the unity between the Jiva and the Brahma is such that it is not something distinct or inferior, that it is not something which in essential quality is further removed. Because if it was so, then there could have been no worship of the Nirguna Brahma as Saguna Brahma. There could have been no avatar. The very fact that Hindus accept avatar, that avatar is there as a reality, that avatar accepts creation, it accepts Jeev, it accepts Jagat, and it is through the avatar and the creation that one understands the broader reality. So that kind of a contradiction which exists in the Islamic world does not exist in the Hindu traditions. It does not exist in the Indian darshanas. It's a very different way of making a distinction. So I would now like to go on to the next, Karma Sanshaya. Having established in the first step of Udbhasa the essential doctrine of the Savita Mantra and the Brahmavad, that is Sarvam Idam Khalu Brahma, we come to introduction of the doctrine of karma, and we make that clear as an upadesh or as a doctrine to one who is to accept Hinduism. You see, the karma theory or the idea of karma, karma siddhanta, is most essential to the Hindu system of thought. It is on karma siddhanta that you can have the idea of punarjanma. Because if there is no karma siddhanta, there will be no punarjanma. If there is no karma siddhanta, there will be no social hierarchy, there will be no varna. If there is no karma siddhanta, then there would be no division of life into 4 ashramas or a way of leading life or stages, biological stages of life. So it is essentially the doctrine of karma or the perception of what is karma that make punarjanma, that make varnashram, and that make the social order of Hinduism, and that make the relationship of the individual to society. It is in this manner that karma sanshaya is to be explained, that why karma is to be accepted as a positive thing. At this point, it is very essential to make it clear that karma is not fate. That prarabdha, that is karma as it has been accumulated in the previous lifetime, is not your destiny. that it is only a balance that you have. Now to deduct from that balance or to add into that balance is the job of the action that a jiva or a particular person does today. And along with that is the doctrine of the four Purusharthas. I forgot to mention, but here along with Punarjanma and Varnashram, the four Purushartha, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha should also be brought in, because you transform your karma. You transform your karmas through Purusharthas. I mean, I am what I am because of my past action, but I am not a slave to them, because I have the Purusharthas, I have the free will. There is no doctrine in India, there is no philosophic system in India which propounds predestination, that this is something which has to happen. So the predestination idea does not exist, because it cannot subsist, or it cannot coexist with the karma theory. The karma theory is making your future, transforming your earlier karma, and making your future through your Purusharthas, the Purusharthas being Dharma, Artha, Kam and Moksha. So, Karma Sanshray, the philosophical system being explained, after these two steps we go to the third, and the third step is Nama Kula Dharana. Now, as I tried to explain earlier, that what I have tried to do is to place this Dharma Pravesha ceremony into the sequence of 16 sanskaras. The 16 sanskaras are mentioned from the very first Garbhadhan, and then at a point Garbhadhan, Simantonayan, then there is the birth. After the birth, birth is something which happens naturally. It is something, Garbhadhan as a matter of fact is when the child, boy or girl, comes into the womb of a Hindu mother. Now here, at what point are we going to bring the neophyte or the new person, the new Hindu? At what point are we going to bring the person in? And I thought the person we could bring in after the birth, because physically the person has born, has led some life. We now come to the point of her or his having a new name and also coming to adopt a family. You see, most of these ceremonies of conversion to Hinduism, namely the Arya Samaj idea of converting somebody to Hinduism, is heavily influenced by the Christian practices. Now, the Christian practice is that of baptizing, bringing the person out of the water into the world of the earth and air, and bringing him into Christendom or into the fold of all other Christians. Whereas, and that is how it is the individual who is given a status, who can remain an individual only if he or she wants to. Whereas in the Hindu system, it is far more real to make the new Hindu understand that he is not just adopting a system of thought or a dharma. He is also adopting a people. Now that's very important. He is adopting a family. And therefore, the families which are present there at the ceremony and the families who are accepting him as a new Hindu, they adopt him as part of the, or her as part of the family. And therefore, in adopting that family, the person gets not only the naam or the name, but also gets the kul, that is the family, and the kul will also have a gotra, in certain cases a pravar also. So you get placed into not just a vague Hindu community, but you get placed into a family which has a family name, a jati name, a varna name, a gotra. That is, you come close then not just to the living people, but to the ancestors of those living people, right up to the point of the Vedic rishis. I would like this point to be appreciated, because here you are adopting something which is not just a set of beliefs that I accept Christ, and Christ has said that he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness but have the light of life, and that is enough. No. Apart from the things that we have talked about, the Savita, the Brahma, Sarvamidam Khalu Brahma, Upadesh and all that, you adopt a family, you adopt people. And these people have an inheritance within a giving culture, and therefore you adopt a culture. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that when you adopt Hinduism, you just don't adopt something which is rhetorical, which is only in words or in ideas. You adopt a living civilization. You adopt a living culture. And unless you adopt that, there is no sense in your becoming a Hindu. Now, I am not saying that you should become an Indian national, or that you should have any special allegiance, political allegiance to India as a nation. I am not thinking of any of that sort of a thing. But I am thinking of the family, and the family which already has an inheritance. So, to my mind, that gives a greater closeness, and it would also give a greater sense of belonging to the new person. So, a person who is naturally born a Hindu is now born into a Hindu family by an act of choice. Now, you see, I see some messages, particularly from Kaul Sahab and some other, regarding Shankaracharya and the Buddhist conflict, so to speak, quote unquote. You see, I would like to first of all submit here that in India there has been from very early times a very clear distinction between a sampradaya which belongs to a particular guru, a darshan, and which also prescribes a sadhana, which are very diverse, and people have been adopting them. As the poet Pushpadanta said, Ruchinam Vaichitriat Rijukutila Nana Pathajusham Nrinam Eko Gamyaha. That men have to go only to one place. You see, one has to go to one place. I will just wrap it up quickly. We have to go to only one place, but we can adopt several ways, ruchi, according to our ruchi. So, if you are a Bodh, then you have done it for that method. If you are a Shaiv, then you have adopted that darshan and sadhana. But remember, what we don't talk about, what the Indologists don't talk about at all, is that India has always accepted the Varna and the Ashram and the Achar Samhita, the four Purusharthas, the Smritis, no matter to which sampradaya they belong. So, this changeover from Bauddha to Jain, from Jain to Shakt is taking place within a family, but marriages have not taken place according to that. There has been a uniform civil code. There has been a system of dispensing with property which is more or less the same all over India. The Dharma Shastra has been the same all over India. What has differed is the local custom, local customary law, or what has been called the Lokachara. But there was a whole system which operated, and Hinduism accepted that very well. Now that is something which is far more important today for this. I will just name the other two steps, and then on next Saturday we can go into a detailed discussion. So the number 4 is the step number 4, Rajiv ji, is Vidyarambha or Upanayan. The person is initiated into the Upanayan sanskar, which is he is or she is persuaded that now your education, now your understanding of this dharma has also to begin. That it is something which you have to do consciously. I'll talk more about and the details next Saturday. And finally, the 5th, which is very important, is that the person is given after a Vedic home, after a Vedic yagya, where mantras are read for Agni, Indra, Shri, Usha, etc., then one is given a murti of an Ishtadev. Now, why I consider this as very essential, in simple words, is this: because throughout my talk, throughout my efforts, I am insisting upon the unity of the Nirguna and the Saguna sadhana. And the emphasis is on Saguna sadhana, because it is the Saguna sadhana which is the life and the spirit of Hindu traditions right from early times. We have seen in 5,000 years that whatever was presented by our seers to us as Nirguna was transformed immediately into Saguna and given to the people and lived as Saguna. The whole Indian culture, whole Indian civilization has been living as Saguna. In last 150 years, it is nothing else except a Christian plot a monotheistic conspiracy to denigrate the whole tradition of Saguna Upasana, of temples, of Murti Puja and all that, in order to elevate the values of a Brahmic monotheism. So, Rajiv ji, thank you so much. And if you think we have time for questions, and if you think people are willing to still hang around, we could go ahead. Rajiv ji.
Thank you, Bharati. Such an enlightening discourse. So we have spent 13th century since the incursion of the first incursion of Islam, or 1400 years, and it took us that long to actually come up with a method.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that these methods haven't existed; they have, but there's really needed a mainstream method that can introduce a person from outside into the world of dharma.
Right.
And then, of course, once they enter, then they have their choices in front of them, including Jaina, Buddha,
right,
whatever else. So, with that, I'll invite for questions. I see a few hands raised. Now, please ask a question. We do not want a preamble or your own discourse here. Your question should be just 2 lines. Give the background. We understand what you are talking about. And if there is anything that needs to be clarified, you can do that in at a later date, or over email or WhatsApp, or just make use of the WhatsApp group for detailed discussion. So questions only, please. Abin Sur, first question.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Thank you. So, Bharatji, one question regarding the very first slide. Like the Gayatri Mantra, should the initiation be done according to your understanding, should it be done as per the Tantric Diksha, like giving it in the ear, or just mentioning the mantra to him in an official manner?
You see, I am proposing this whole plan not as a final thing, but just as a starting point. I am hoping to, I wouldn't say start a movement, but I am hoping to initiate something which other people will take on. And if this is to become a social movement, then all these little details or all these activities will find their own place, their time, their variety. So for me or anybody else to say, no, it should not be in the ear, or it should not be, it's too early, and it's just it's a matter of right now the idea. The practice, the whole practice would have to be evolved. It will evolve in a course of time.
Okay, next question is from Subhash Duaji.
Yes, Subhash ji.
Yeah, my question is, you just said that conversion back to Hinduism started only after Arya Samaj, and Arya Samaj followed it from Christianity. But before even Christianity was there into existence, Shankaracharya ji and Shankaracharya ji converted a lot of Buddhists back to Sanatana Dharma. So Sanatana Dharma is the oldest dharma, and the dharma cannot be more than one, because Ishwar is one. If Ishwar is one, he or she has to be same for all, and he has to be same for all, and his orders, that is his message, that is his dharma, cannot be different for different people. So dharma has to be one for each and every one.
Well, you see, the word dharma is used in all kinds of what is called artha-vyapti, or meanings, and here we are talking of practical way of doing things, living, practicing a culture, practicing a philosophical disposition, etc.
But
Now,
for interrupting you,
and now,
I would like to
Yeah.
say something.
Yeah.
Because
Subhash,
Dharma as per
no debate.
Manuspati.
Let
Dharma-
Professor Buddha answer the question. Okay?
Sorry.
and then this whole business of Shankaracharya versus Bauddhas, as I said, this has been overdone. First of all, how much of it is historically true? That is, I see I am muted by the host. Okay, I am unmuted by the host now. Now, I don't want to go and waste time into that. As I said, people have been changing from one sampradaya to another all the while. And even today, in a large number of homes, somebody is Jain, somebody is Vaishnava. My wife sitting right across from here, she is Jain. But we were married because we are both Baniyas. And we were both from, the Vaishya family. So according to the Varnashram Dharma, it was a correct lawful marriage. But then she is Jain and she has pursued her Jain sadhana or her Jain along with what I practice. So let us not make this distinction between different sampradayas as has been done by Western anthropology or ethnology. Let us stick to what has been practiced in India. Now, having said that, as I said right at the beginning, that this is for a larger fold. It is important for Hindus to understand that it is as a whole that you have to answer a challenge. For God's sake, wake up. You cannot answer this challenge as Jains, Bauddhas, Shaktas, Samayacharis, Vamacharis, etc., belonging to this tradition, that sampradaya, this guru, that guru. So you have to do this. And if you have to do this, then you have to have a collective identity of the Hindu, and you have to work out a ritual and a Dharma Pravesh ceremony for the whole of the Hindu Samaj. Regarding Arya Samaj, I am not trying to replace anything they are doing. I am a great admirer of the missionary work they are doing. I am only doing something, and Rajiv ji is doing something, and you all are doing something which complements, which enlarges it further. That's all. Yeah, next question, please.
Yes, Sundar Vishwalingam ji.
Yes, Bharatji, this is Sundar here from
Hello.
Chicago. Thank you for addressing this very important topic. I just wanted to raise a doubt here because
Yes.
your whole presentation seems to presuppose that the foreigner has to join the collective Hindu social-religious community before taking initiation into a specific spiritual sampradaya.
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience of my friends who are interested in Hinduism, Americans, others, or who, and in my reading about such people, the process usually seems to be the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
They first are attracted to a particular spiritual path,
Yeah.
whether it is Hare Krishna or Muktananda
Right,
or
right,
Ramakrishna Mission, for example, Jeffrey Long.
Yeah.
And then only later they consider whether to become part of the Hindu community. You know, they may marry a Hindu spouse.
Right.
Or they may decide to resettle in India.
Right,
But that
right.
comes second.
Yeah.
And for many people, for many of them, I would think perhaps the majority of them, they are satisfied with the particular spiritual path they are following, and they don't
Yeah.
have any real intention to become part of the,
Yeah.
the larger Hindu community that you are speaking of.
Yeah.
And then conversely, in India itself, many people who nowadays, modern Hindus, would consider themselves to be Hindus, strongly Hindu, but not necessarily no longer following the Varnashrama Dharma or even the Samskaras.
Right.
So if you could perhaps clarify this doubt.
Right. Now,
Thank you.
Now, first of all, I am so happy that you are here, We haven't chatted for a long time. We are old friends. Number two, what you say is true, but I'm trying to develop something which answers to the needs of not just the foreigners or the Europeans or the Americans coming into the Hindu fold, but to a very large number of people from different backgrounds, like maybe some Muslims who want to convert to Hinduism, some Christians who want to go back to Hinduism, which is one of the most important tasks which Hindus have to undertake, is to reconvert Christians and Muslims within India. I am not ashamed of saying that. And then there are our dear Marxist friend who have led a Jabalic life or the life of a total bohemian. Then there are, you see, all kinds of people. Like, and here you have the example of something which has been very effective of the Arya Samaj. You see, the Arya Samaj offers a door to all kinds of people. And just as the Arya Samaj has also acquired under a government act the power to issue a certificate where the person can themselves then declare oneself to be a legal Hindu, I would want that we also develop something like that. So I accept what you say, it's entirely true, but I'm not thinking just of the Europeans and the Americans coming in. I'm thinking of a very large number of people from various backgrounds, largely within India itself.
Thank you. That explains it. I was perhaps not looking at it from this angle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aditya Dhopadkar.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So I broadly, namaskar sir. I broadly agree with everything that you have said, but I have only 3 points to make.
Sir.
The first one you said was the Gayatri Mantra.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, I hear you very well.
So is the Gayatri Mantra indeed the best mantra for the initial initiation? I mean, just as a question, whether Jains and Buddhist people would accept it as something in common with the Vedic? I mean, what is it that the Jains, Vaidis and Buddhists would have in common amongst themselves? Whether it is indeed the Gayatri Mantra, which then that's fabulous, or is it something else? Could we have the Nasadiya Sutta or something? Point number 2, I will ask my 3 questions so that you can then unmute me and
Right.
Second, what about some kind of a Ibrahimi Mata Khandanam, where they do something token to say this is for those people who have been influenced by communism or some form of Abrahamism, and they have or they were born into it and are coming back.
Yeah.
So maybe they can do the token act of walking over a particular text, like
Yeah.
the Quran or Bible,
Yes,
or
yes.
maybe they say something where they say they have rejected this,
Yeah.
or they give a reason from their own explanation about why they are not Marxist anymore.
Good,
as
thank
a
you.
necessary step so that there is no return back to that.
Right.
And number 3 is some kind of an acceptance of Hindu sacred geography and Hindu sacred agroecology,
Yeah.
the Gau and Ganga.
Right.
So we will uphold a cow because
Yeah.
that is common to all. Because for all the Shastrartha that takes place
Right.
between the Digambar Jain and Gaudiya Vaishnav, they both will stand at the cow's place and protect.
Yeah.
So she unites and she is the next galvanizing force for next galvanizing movement. Similarly, you have the Ganga, which is no doubt the holiest of all waters. So
Right.
can something like that also be incorporated with the Shastri Prarthana?
Right.
Common to all the 3.
Okay. Now my answer is I would say I'll first come to your third question. I would say yes, something which is symbolic for the whole of India.
I'm unable to hear you, sir.
Hello. Is my microphone on?
Yeah. Now I am able to hear.
Okay. Now what I'm saying is that I would begin with your third point, and I would say that yes, some symbolic ritual where you accept the cow, the Ganga, or maybe all the the 10 rivers or the 5 sacred rivers in a
Manure
pot.
tree.
Yeah. So Ganga, Kaveri, etc. That is something which accepts the geography. Now, regarding the first and the second, let me ask you a question. You see, you are thinking from the point of view of a Jain or a Bodha, whether he or she would accept the Gayatri Mantra or not. Now, this is not what the situation here is. This is somebody who is outside the Hindu fold or the Indian fold or the Jain or the Bodha fold already. So here, it is not a question of what should be my paddhati. Like, see, your point of view is very valid if you have to formulate a marriage ceremony. So the Sikhs would say that no, we are not going to accept Agni. We are going to accept Granth Sahib. That kind of a thing. But that applies to those who are already Hindus of a sampradaya. Yeah.
Yes, and the second question of the Ibrahim Matta Khandanam.
Now that is something, as I said, that is something, I and Rajiv ji, we had a discussion on that. And we thought that there should be a Tiraskar ceremony. Now, I would say that, is that necessary? Because if you really think, broadly speaking, if you really think that Sarvamidam Khalu Brahma is true, then where is the Tiraskar? I mean, I grow out of that doctrine. But I don't reject anything which is valid of my past experience, because that is part of my karma. Now that karma has to be further embellished, or that karma has to be enlarged, and I have to become free of the constraints of my earlier karma. So I have to become free of the idea that Allah is somebody who punishes so and such people. I have to free myself of these small ideas. But denouncing what I have already been would seem to me to be a needless exercise in self-pity. That's totally against the spirit of Hinduism. You see, the Hindu is Uttishta, stand up, be full of joy, Utsaha, Harsha, Ananda. These are the key words for a Hindu. Not Glani, not some kind of Paschatap. So there is no question of Paschatap or Glani or wallowing in self-pity here. That's why that's how I look at it, Yeah.
Purnima Naji, next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Namaskar, sir.
Namaste.
I have a political question.
Right.
You mentioned about the recent conversation that we get into trouble in terms of explaining what Hinduism is.
Yeah.
We constantly get attacked by our opponent that Hinduism didn't exist before, not until 11th century, etc.
Yes.
They dismiss our belief, they dismiss our thought process, and dismiss specifically the spiritualism.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on this aspect, because this is creating a huge issue between as you know, the Abrahamic religion versus us.
And it's not going to fade away, because it's high time that we stop offering apologies to them. You see, we have a textual tradition which talks about the unity of our ideas right from the Vedic times till our modern sages. So if that continuity exists, then why do you say that Hinduism did not exist? You see, Hinduism is not a social order, like it's not just Varnashram. It is not just a name or something which a Persian king, talked about, naming people living across Sindhu as Hindu. It's not just geography. It's a whole series of ideas, a textual tradition which preserves those ideas, and they are very obvious to anybody who wants to read these texts. You see, this is the same kind of argument that people like Shashi Tharoor gives, that I am a Hindu because I have no compulsion to be this or that or that or that. I don't have a single book. Now, this is no argument. I am a Hindu not because I don't have a single book. I am a Hindu because I have a glorious tradition of thousands of books, but all these thousands of books are not at loggerheads. There is a fantastic unity, and there has been a continuity, not just at the level of ideas, but at the level of living. And that living civilization can be seen as something that has existed and is still existing. So it is archaeologically there, it is textually there, and it is there as a people. So I think this is what I believe, and this is what we should concentrate upon, and we should, for the sake of